I think The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild tapped into a genre of gaming which, in its entirety, had never really been done before. It took inspiration from many popular games like Skyrim and Assassin's Creed.
Hey, you. Finally awake.
So, you're finally awake.
Shut up back there.
But coupled them with new ideas and its own color palette. Much like Dark Souls, Breath of the Wild has fostered so-called Breath of the Wild clones, games similar to Breath of the Wild in genre and concept. Immortals Fenyx Rising is one of these so-called clones. But I think the term is rather reductive and useless, and actually kind of wrong. Rather than clone, I'd say inspired by, because Fenyx Rising is so much more than just a copy-paste, and actually does a lot of things better than Breath of the Wild. That's what I want to showcase in this video. But first, I hope you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much, guys. There's a feeling The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild gives that few other games do. It might be hard to explain what that feeling actually is, but somehow, this feeling stays with you from start to finish. I think you can hear it in the music. It's subtle, almost not even there. Some piano strokes here, and a few others there. It's a sort of a compromise between the utter silence of the Dark Souls games and the fantastical soundtrack of the Elder Scrolls series. You see, Breath of the Wild takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. It might be hard to tell at times simply because the world is so beautiful and green, but it is desolate, overrun by monsters and on the brink of ruin either way. I think this is part of the reason why so many have fallen in love with this game. But it's not the only one. You see, so much of the appeal of Breath of the Wild comes from the power it gives to the player. You can reach virtually any spot in the world because it allows you to either walk, swim, climb, or glide your way there. So your movement is never really restricted by missing a game design feature. You can use the game's resources to do a whole lot of stuff, like combine ingredients to cook valuable meals or potions, combine an item with another, and then just literally hit them with a third to create fire. It's both physically coherent and intuitive, and as long as you manage to apply somewhat real-life knowledge to the game, which games kind of rarely makes us do, you can get some really incredible results. Now, I don't think Breath of the Wild is a perfect game. There's actually a fair bit I dislike about it, but it does offer some genuinely valuable aspects that to a large extent outweighs the negatives, and has gone missing in many other games. I spent about 100 hours in Breath of the Wild before I began playing it with my fiancé, who spent another 100 hours in it, and it was quite amazing to see how her approach to the game differed from my own. Whereas I wanted to see where the story went, and went from village to village only to be quite disappointed by lackluster storytelling, she got mesmerized by the game mechanics. Yes, she struggled with the battles to begin with, but she persevered, and instead of giving up, she began creating dishes which restored her life, stamina, or made her stronger in other ways. The incredible thing was that the game provided tools that allowed her to manipulate objects in the world and reach new places. She was quite stubborn too, refusing to give up climbing a mountainside made wet from rain even though she knew it would be hard, and even though I told her not to bother with it, to go around it instead. But she managed to do it anyway, even though it took a few tries. I loved seeing the surprised look on her face when Link began shining and was suddenly hit by lightning. She became obsessed with loot. The rewards gained from straying from the path were many and never far apart, and almost always let her improve her character in meaningful ways. Defeating enemies in certain locations opened treasure chests, where she always hoped for a new and better weapon, and it was endearing seeing how happy she became when she got a sick new sword or bow. Bosses were difficult to defeat, but almost always had a weak point, and left behind massive spoils after being beaten. Once she reached the final boss, she had no issue whatsoever defeating Calamity Ganon, absolutely destroying him on the first try using everything she had learned on her journey, something I myself was not able to do as easily. Like many other games, Breath of the Wild offers different biomes, regions that differ from one another in climate and obstacles. It offers challenge temples where you test your problem-solving skills and receive valuable prizes for completing them. It offers semi-random events that spice up the open world and makes for an incredibly mysterious game. It's a gorgeous world when it wants to be. Just watch the sense of space and scale in this shot. You can even play football.
Por arriba.
Basketball. And golf, all in the same game. I mean, who needs sports games when Link can do it all? I think this is the appeal of Breath of the Wild. The incredible sense of reward that comes from simply exploring the game and taking advantage of the resources it provides you with. And I think that this is where the originality of the game lies. Not in the open world, not the towers, not in the combat, and definitely not in the story, but rather in the things you can do and accomplish in this open world, and how so much of this is based on individual creativity and engagement. When Immortals Fenyx Rising was announced as Gods and Monsters, it was quickly deemed a Breath of the Wild clone, not completely unfairly either. I mean, it kinda looked like Breath of the Wild, and once it was out, it became clear that much of the game design was similar too. I'd personally call it inspiration and not copying, but we'll leave it at that. Fenyx Rising had much to live up to. Quite like the Dark Souls clones, I was wondering whether Ubisoft was simply releasing a title with little effort, only relying on the Zelda hype rather than a unique take on the now popular genre. But to my surprise, Fenyx Rising is a great game in and of itself, and it even does certain things better than Zelda does. What I love about Fenyx Rising is the gameplay loop. You very quickly go from exploration to combat, to finding a challenge, to finding a mystery to solve, to entering a challenge vault, and back to exploration, combat, and so on. The gorgeous world makes it so easy to explore and sink hours into going from A to B to C. Whereas Hyrule is massive and empty, quiet and forsaken, the Golden Isle is anything but. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a kind of post-apocalyptic world we're met with here as well, but I think of it more like if the gods temporarily left Greek mythological heaven but left the lights on. Here, beautiful temples and old ruins scatter the land, both friendly and wild animals and monsters roam the fields, and beautiful pieces of music set the mood. It never really rains on the Golden Isle, the sun shines throughout the day, and the night reveals a gorgeous night sky illuminated by stars and distant galaxies. There are biomes here as well, one region offering green fields, another filled with industry, and more still. You defeat bosses out in the world, you collect resources that can be crafted into valuable potions, upgrade your abilities, complete quests, and improve your armor. Like in Breath of the Wild, special resources can also be used to upgrade your health and stamina. There are also some fun short videos accompanying each one of them, which you can skip if you ever get tired of them. My fiancée and I have a combined 80 hours in Fenyx Rising, and like her approach to Breath of the Wild, her way of tackling Fenyx Rising was amusing to watch. She immediately recognized many of the concepts shared between the games, like the use of stamina and upgrading them. Again, whereas I more or less went after the story missions, she very often got sidetracked, choosing to collect all the resources she could, go after mini-bosses and upgrade her gear before moving on. I think this is what makes Fenyx Rising so wonderfully addicting, that simply playing is so much fun, and you always want more. I think this is the crucial difference between Breath of the Wild and Immortals Fenyx Rising, where Breath of the Wild always has more in store for you. It's not necessarily fun to get from A to B, to fight, and there's very few ways of actually upgrading your character besides getting more life or stamina. But in Fenyx Rising, getting from A to B, fighting, and upgrading your character with new abilities is the main appeal. The combat system is arcadey and snappy, the ability is cool to use, and it doesn't hurt that, as a role-playing game, you can actually see by the numbers how much damage you're dealing, so you're able to really feel how much stronger you become while on your journey. And the gliding, although feeling a bit less grounded and realistic than in Zelda, feels snappier and more like you're flying rather than just riding the wind. One area where Ubisoft did a significantly better job than Nintendo is in the main story. Immortals Fenyx Rising tells the story of a world where Typhon threatens the world. He has weakened the gods, who all need your help to have their strength restored. Each god, from Aphrodite to Athena to Ares and Hephaestus, all lack a major part of them which makes them who they are. Athena, for example, lacks her judgment, while Hephaestus lacks his memory. What follows are fun and genuinely sweet character arcs that have meaning and moral. Each god's story telling a story of the human condition, and that even bad or feared sides of a person can also be valuable and meaningful. Compare this to the stories of Breath of the Wild. The world is threatened by Calamity Ganon, and most of civilization is wiped out except for a few towns here and there. You need to save legendary heroes that will help you defeat Ganon, but in comparison to the gods in Fenyx Rising, these heroes are all painfully shallow, offering little else than help with defeating Ganon. Zelda herself has almost no role in the game, and despite being portrayed as a strong person who's holding Ganon off in his castle, her voice is almost always scared sounding, not at all reminiscent of a strong or confident person.
I thought I made it clear that I'm not in need of an escort. It seems I'm the only one with a mind of my own. I, the person in question, am fine, regardless of the king's orders.
She ended up just being super annoying to me, and I wish Nintendo had done more with her and the other legendary heroes. I guess there's a DLC, but that doesn't really fix the main game's issue. What makes this extra sad is that Breath of the Wild's background story is actually really cool. It's a kind of Doom Dark Souls-esque world where you're left to fend for yourself, but there's so much more here that, at least to me, could have been done better. I wish the game was darker, I wish it had more voice acting, I wish it had more believable and deep characters with actual struggles that reflected the nightmare state of the world, not some old person who got turned into a 6-year-old girl and now do all of these weird-ass poses. And I wish it had a lot more varied monsters, buildings, and more awe-inspiring ruins of the old world. Fenyx Rising doesn't really need to be darker because it literally takes place in heaven, yet it still displays some truly breathtaking pieces of decaying architecture. It's hard to say which game is really best since it depends on what you prefer. If you prefer creativity, freedom to do what you want, massive options in weapons and the ability to cook, then Breath of the Wild will probably be your favorite. But if you prefer addicting combat with cool abilities, a more fast-paced adventure, a more engaging soundtrack and a better story, then Fenyx Rising might be the game you should go with first. Either way, you can't really go wrong here. And in the end, I think the real open world action RPG were the friends we made along the way, regardless of whether you played as Link or Fenyx. Thank you so much for watching this video, I really hope you enjoyed it. Have you played Breath of the Wild or Immortals Fenyx Rising yet? And if so, which one do you prefer? Please like, comment and subscribe to the channel my friends, it would help out a lot, and I hope to see you here next time as well. Cheers!